Simple woman threatened by black belts at karate class. They had no idea she's a lethal fighter. She didn't look like a threat. No fancy gear. No black belt. No ego walking through the door. Just a simple woman. Hood up, gym bag in hand. Eyes down, quiet. The kind of person you'd pass on the street without a second thought. But from the moment she stepped into that karate dojo, something in the air shifted. Something subtle, instinctive. You couldn't put your finger on it, but you felt it. At first, no one really noticed her. The black belts were already deep into their warm-ups, grunting through kata drills, cracking jokes with the instructor, half-sparring to show off. Their movements were sharp, but their attention was wrapped in routine and ego. They barely looked up when the door opened. Just another beginner, they figured. Maybe someone chasing a New Year's resolution a few months too late. But one person did look up. Sensei Nakamura, the head instructor, paused mid-sentence when she entered. His eyes scanned her without expression, but you could tell he was measuring something. She wasn't dressed like a martial artist, just a gray zip-up hoodie and black leggings, with worn-out sneakers and no visible belt. She wasn't tall. She wasn't muscular. She wasn't smiling. She didn't come in looking for approval. She came in like she had already decided what she was there to do. "Can I help you?" he asked. She looked him straight in the eyes for the first time, and something about her stare made his voice falter, just for a second. "I'm here to train," she said. That was all. She signed the waiver, bowed politely, and stepped onto the mat barefoot. No ceremony. No small talk. She moved with quiet confidence, like someone who had done this before, just not here. Around her, a few of the younger students exchanged glances. One of the black belts, Jason, tall, cocky, and always first to run his mouth, leaned over to his friend. "She looks like she got lost on her way to a Pilates class." They both laughed, loud enough for her to hear. She didn't flinch, didn't react at all, just placed her bag neatly by the wall, stretched her arms behind her back, and began warming up. Her movements were simple at first, neck rolls, shoulder rotations, squats. But there was something in the way she moved. No hesitation, no stiffness. Fluid, controlled, lived in. Then came the drills. Sensei Nakamura split the class into pairs. "Basic stances and footwork," he said. "Find someone around your level." Jason raised his hand immediately. "I'll take the new girl." The room chuckled. It was an unspoken rule. Experienced students sometimes paired with beginners to help them, mostly to flex. Everyone assumed this would be a quick, gentle ego-crushing for the new woman, followed by her quiet disappearance. She walked up to him and nodded. No words. No handshake. Just eyes steady, unreadable. They began. Simple forward and backward movements. He exaggerated his speed a bit, just to test her. She kept pace perfectly, her posture flawless. Then came the first turn. He spun fast, expecting her to stumble. She didn't. She matched it with surgical precision, her pivot cleaner than his. Jason's grin faded slightly. He tried again, adding a little flair this time. A subtle taunt. A smirk. He lunged just a bit too hard, extending his leg with a snap. She shifted her weight. Blocked. Perfect form. His face changed. "You've done this before," he said, eyebrows raised. She didn't answer. Sensei Nakamura noticed from across the room and walked over. "Have you trained before?" he asked casually. She gave a small shrug. "A little." The sensei studied her. He wasn't convinced, but not because she seemed unsure. Because no one who moved like that had a little training. That kind of control came from years. Maybe decades. "Stick around for sparring," he said. "Let's see where you're at." Jason looked thrilled. This was his chance to turn the heat up. As class moved on, the rest of the students began paying more attention to her. Whispers floated. "She's not a white belt. That sweep she did was clean. Did you see her hands?" The tone had shifted from mockery to suspicion, from arrogance to quiet unease. She remained calm, unmoved, watching, absorbing everything. Not just the techniques, but the people, their timing, their attitude, their rhythm, like a predator learning the habits of its prey. And when the instructor finally called for light sparring rounds, and her name was called, something in her eyes changed. Not aggression, not fear, just focus. Cold, razor-edge focus. Jason bounced on his toes, gloves on, already grinning. "Don't worry," he said with a wink. "I'll go easy." She said nothing. She stepped into position, lifted her guard, and waited. The dojo had no idea what was coming. The dojo doesn't forget moments like this. From the outside, it looked like a normal sparring session, just a beginner getting a light round with a black belt. But to those who had seen enough fights, there was something off. Something in the silence. The room, usually filled with the echo of punches and laughter, had gone eerily still. All eyes were locked on one unlikely pair, the quiet woman with no belt, and Jason, the dojo's loudest ego. She stood motionless, poised, eyes locked onto him, not wide with fear, but narrow with calculation. Her stance was different now. Subtle but solid. Balanced. Her knees were soft, heels light, chin tucked in like she was expecting more than just light contact. And maybe she was. Jason cracked his neck and gave a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. "You sure you're ready?" he asked, bouncing on his heels. She didn't answer. Just raised her guard, tight, precise, close to her body like she had something to protect, or maybe something she was waiting to unleash. Sensei Nakamura clapped twice. "Begin." Jason moved first. He always did. Quick jab. Testing. Nothing fancy. She swayed barely, just enough for it to miss. Not a flinch. Not a blink. Just a smooth, instinctive slip. Jason blinked, thrown off by how effortless it was. He jabbed again, faster this time. Same result. Missed. Another inch and he would have hit air. From the sidelines, the black belts leaned in, suddenly quieter. Jason's jaw tightened. He stepped in with a roundhouse kick, sharp, aggressive, enough to rattle most white belts. She didn't block. She turned with it. Flowed through it like silk in the wind. Her body rolled under the strike with a pivot so fluid it looked like choreography. Jason's kick met nothing but space. Off balance, he stumbled forward, just for a breath, but enough to open himself up. She didn't attack. She just reset her stance. Watching. Calculating. That was worse. Jason's pride flared. The room was watching. People were whispering now, and he didn't like how they were looking at her. Like she wasn't a mistake, but a question none of them could answer. He launched again, this time faster, angrier. A jab-cross combo followed by a spinning back kick. He meant to land it. Not to hurt her, but to remind everyone who he was. That's when it happened. She stepped inside the combo, inside, and parried the cross with her forearm like it was weightless. Her elbow rose just slightly, her body pivoting low. And in a blink, too fast for most eyes to follow, her foot slid behind his, and her shoulder nudged forward with perfect timing. Jason's feet left the mat. Thud. He landed hard on his back. The room gasped. He stared up at the ceiling, blinking, disoriented, searching for an explanation. She didn't gloat. She didn't move. She just stood there, breathing evenly, waiting. The dojo was dead silent. Jason scrambled up, cheeks flushed, trying to laugh it off. "Nice one," he said, forcing a grin. But his eyes weren't smiling. He circled her again, this time slower. Wiser. Angry. He threw a kick to her ribs hard. Too hard for light sparring. This time she caught it. Her right arm hooked under his leg midair and her left hand braced his chest. With a subtle twist, she redirected his force, not fighting it, guiding it, until his body flipped sideways. He crashed again, even harder. A few students stepped back. The whispers stopped. Jason stayed down longer this time. He looked up at her, eyes wide, chest rising, mouth open. Who the hell was she? Sensei Nakamura took a step forward, his arms crossed, face unreadable. He watched her with narrowed eyes, as if pieces were clicking together in his mind. Something about her posture, her form, her restraint. This wasn't a fluke. It wasn't YouTube-learned tricks. This was something else. She offered Jason her hand. He hesitated, then took it. She pulled him up with one motion. Solid. Unshaken. Not even winded. "You all right?" she asked quietly. Jason nodded. Not with confidence, but respect. The instructor stepped in now. "That's enough," he said. Good control. But his eyes never left her. The class ended minutes later, but no one left right away. They lingered, talking in low voices, watching her as she quietly gathered her things. Some still looked confused, others impressed. But Jason? He didn't speak again. He just sat on the bench, staring down at the mat, trying to understand what had just happened. She walked past the group of black belts on her way out. No smirk, no wave, just quiet steps and a calm that felt like power disguised as humility. Nobody laughed now. Nobody scoffed. Because now they knew what Jason learned the hard way. She wasn't just another simple woman who stumbled into the wrong class. She was something else. And whatever that was, they hadn't seen the full extent of it yet. Some stories aren't worn on the skin. They're buried in the silence between movements. The dojo felt different after she left. The echoes of the spar still lingered. Jason on the mat, stunned and breathless. The whispered shift of doubt in the room. The quiet rustle of a woman who came and went like a ghost. The students filed out slowly, some speaking in hushed tones, others just walking in silence, glancing back as if expecting her to return. But she didn't. That night, Sensei Nakamura stayed behind, long after the lights dimmed. He stood alone on the mat, arms folded, mind circling the memory of her movements. The way she flowed, turned, countered, not like someone trained to fight, but like someone forged in it. Years of teaching, decades of combat, and still, he couldn't quite place it. Until he remembered a name. It was faint, like dust on a forgotten shelf. A woman he'd heard about long ago in Okinawa. Rumors mostly. Stories passed through instructors late at night over rice wine. A girl who had trained with ex-special forces. Disappeared after a personal tragedy. Quiet. Lethal. Barely seen in competition, but whispered about with reverence and fear. Could it be her? He picked up his phone, opened his contacts, dialed an old friend, another retired sensei, now teaching in the mountains. When the man answered, his voice was gravelly, cautious. She showed up today, Nakamura said without preamble. A pause. Then, did she fight? Yes. Did she hold back? Another pause. Nakamura exhaled. Yes. The silence on the line was answer enough. Meanwhile, across the city, she sat alone in a small apartment lit by a single desk lamp. Her hoodie was off now, revealing a faint scar running just under her collarbone, a faded, ugly reminder of a fight she didn't walk away from clean. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from memory. The dojo had stirred things up. She hadn't planned to go back. Ever. But something in her had cracked recently, an old voice she couldn't ignore. Not grief. Not revenge. Just unfinished instinct. A need to test herself again. Not in the ring. Not for trophies. But for truth. To know if the weapon inside her was still sharp, or if she'd finally buried it deep enough to forget. And yet, she hadn't forgotten. Not for a second. She still saw their faces when she closed her eyes. Her brother, bleeding, helpless, when he had tried to stand up to a gang member in a dirty alley 6 years ago. She had arrived too late. Just late enough to hear his last breath. That was the night everything inside her fractured. And that was when she disappeared. For years, she trained in silence. Not in dojos, but in basements, with men who didn't flinch at broken ribs. Former soldiers. Survivalists. Brawlers. They didn't teach her points or forms. They taught her how to walk away when no one else could. How to end a fight before it truly began. She had no belts. No titles. Only scars. And now, after everything, she was back on the mat. The next evening, she returned. The dojo buzzed with unspoken anticipation. People pretended not to stare. Jason avoided eye contact. Even the black belts kept their voices low. But Nakamura? He stood straighter. This time, he greeted her directly. You didn't leave your number yesterday. She shrugged. Didn't think you'd need it. I do now. She gave a half smile, barely there. You want answers? No, he said. I want to know if you're staying. She looked around. The room. The students. The mat. I might, she said. If there's room. He nodded slowly. There's always room for someone who respects the art. She bowed. Class began, but the tension never left. Every move she made, every block, every stance was watched. Studied. Some students were curious. Others were uneasy. But none of them could look away. She didn't speak much. Just trained. Flawless. Focused. Calm. Then, after class, one of the younger students, a girl, no more than 15, approached her. Where did you learn to move like that? She asked quietly. She looked down at the girl. Saw the same fire she used to carry. The hunger. The fear. A long way from here, she said gently. And not all of it was good. The girl nodded, not fully understanding, but feeling the weight of it. Can you teach me? Her throat tightened. Maybe, she said softly. But first, you learn the rules. And you don't break them, unless you have to. From the edge of the room, Nakamura watched. He saw something click in her then. Not just the fighter, but the teacher. Maybe, he thought, she hadn't come to fight at all. Maybe she had come to heal. But healing never comes without facing the pain that made you bleed in the first place. And hers? Was only just waking up. The dojo had become a battlefield of silent questions and simmering tensions. Her presence unsettled everyone, especially the black belts, who once ruled the room with unchallenged confidence. Now, their sharp gazes often darted toward her, a simple woman who had already shattered their assumptions with a single sparring match. But beneath the surface, it wasn't just about pride or skill. It was about the secrets she carried, those dark shadows clinging to her like a second skin. After class, as the students filtered out, Jason stayed behind. His bruised ego was harder to mask now. He wasn't just curious anymore, he was unsettled. He needed answers, even if they made him uncomfortable. He found her sitting quietly in the corner, wiping sweat from her brow. Her calm contrasted sharply with his restless energy. "Look," he started, hesitating, "I'm sorry about yesterday. I didn't expect you to move like that." She met his gaze without judgment. "I didn't come here to prove anything to you." Jason ran a hand through his hair, sighing. "Then why?" She paused, eyes distant. "Because sometimes you have to face the things you've been running from, even if they're the darkest parts of yourself." Jason frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" She looked down, fingers tracing a faint scar on her wrist. "I lost someone I couldn't protect. And for years, I thought training harder would change that. But it never does." Her words hung heavy in the air. Jason finally understood this wasn't just about karate. This was about a past soaked in pain and regret. Later that night, alone in her apartment, the memories surged. The echo of footsteps in a dim alley. The flash of a knife. The desperate scream of her brother. She had fought back with everything she had. Years of brutal training honed for moments like this. But she was too late. The image haunted her, raw and unyielding. Since then, she had buried herself in fighting, pushing away the grief, the guilt, the rage. The dojo was her refuge now, but also a reminder that no matter how lethal she was, some wounds never healed. Back at the dojo, Sensei Nakamura watched the subtle shifts in the room. His instincts told him she was more than just a fighter. She was a survivor, a warrior forged in fire no dojo could replicate. He approached her quietly after class. "You carry a heavy burden," he said softly. She looked up, surprised. "How do you know?" He smiled faintly. "Some battles don't leave bruises, but they change you just the same." She nodded, the weight of her silence louder than words. "Maybe it's time to stop running," Nakamura suggested. "Not from your past, but toward your future." She considered this, the idea unsettling yet hopeful. The next week saw her training harder, pushing her limits but also opening up in small ways. The black belts, once skeptical, began to respect her resilience and discipline. Jason, humbled, became an unlikely ally, seeking not only to match her skill but to understand her story. Slowly, the simple woman who walked in unnoticed was becoming the heart of the dojo, not just a fighter, but a teacher, a symbol of strength through vulnerability. Yet, as her past whispered from the shadows, the true test of her resolve was still to come. The dojo was alive with the rhythmic sounds of punches hitting pads, feet sliding across mats, and quiet breaths of concentration. But beneath the steady flow of training, tension simmered just out of sight. Her presence was a ripple in the calm, unsettling the currents of pride and routine. Jason watched her closely during drills. Each movement she made was precise, powerful, but never careless. She was always controlled, like a volcano barely contained beneath a serene surface. And he couldn't help but wonder what fires burned inside her. One evening, after the class ended, Jason approached her again. "You've changed things around here," he said, voice low. She gave a small, tired smile. "Maybe I did." He hesitated, then asked the question he'd been avoiding. "Are you ready for what's next? The real fights?" Her eyes darkened. "I've been ready a long time." Jason didn't press further. But that night, his mind raced. The simple woman, who once seemed like an easy target, was becoming something far more formidable, someone he wasn't sure he could face without doubting himself. Meanwhile, outside the dojo, a new presence was stirring. Word had spread quietly about the woman who defeated a black belt with such ease. It reached ears that thrived on challenge and control. Old rivals. People who remembered her from before. One such figure was watching from a distance, a tall man with a cold stare, a history intertwined with hers. He wasn't just any challenger. He was a ghost from the past, the reason she disappeared for so long. He stepped into the dojo one evening without announcement, his presence like a thunderclap. The room fell silent as everyone recognized him, or at least, the tension told them they should. She turned, heart pounding, the scar beneath her collarbone burning with sudden heat. "I thought you disappeared," he said, voice low but sharp. She didn't answer. The black belt shifted uncomfortably, sensing the history crackling in the air. Sensei Nakamura stepped forward, calm but firm. "This isn't a place for old grudges." The man smiled thinly. "I'm not here to fight your battles. Just hers." That night, she sat alone again, the weight of the past settling like a storm. The man's arrival was a reminder that her scars were more than skin deep. The fight she thought she'd left behind wasn't over. Her training had been preparation, not just for the dojo, but for the reckoning coming her way. She clenched her fists. This time, she wouldn't run. The next day, the dojo buzzed with whispers. Some students speculated about the man's identity. Others felt the tension like a thick fog. Jason approached her quietly. "Who was that?" She looked at him. "Steely. Someone I hoped I'd never see again." Jason nodded slowly. "You don't have to face it alone." For the first time, she let herself consider the possibility. Training intensified. She pushed herself harder, fueled by the storm gathering on the horizon. The black belts rallied, sensing the shift, eager but cautious. Sensei Nakamura watched closely, his faith in her growing. "Your strength isn't just in your fists," he told her one evening. "It's in your heart." She nodded, knowing the real battle wasn't just physical. As night fell, she stood on the dojo mat, alone but resolute. The past was coming for her, but this time, she was ready. The simple woman they once underestimated was no longer hiding. She was a force, and nothing would break her now. The dojo was shrouded in a heavy silence that night, an uneasy calm before a storm. The familiar sounds of training were absent. The students lingered near the entrance, exchanging whispers, eyes flickering nervously toward the woman who now stood alone in the center of the mat. She was no longer just a simple woman to them. She was a symbol of something far more complex. Survival, strength, and a story soaked in pain that refused to stay buried. Her fists were clenched, not from fear, but from resolve. The arrival of the man from her past had shattered the fragile piece she'd tried to rebuild. He had come back like a shadow she thought was long gone, a ghost intent on dragging her back into darkness. Sensei Nakamura approached, his voice low and steady. "You don't have to face this alone." She shook her head slowly. "I do." This was her fight, the one she'd avoided for years. The fight that defined her. Outside the dojo, the cold night air bit sharply as footsteps echoed down the empty streets. The man moved with purpose, a predator drawn to unfinished business. He was calm, but his eyes burned with a dangerous mix of contempt and obsession. Inside, she sat quietly, preparing herself mentally for the confrontation looming just hours away. Her breath was steady, her body coiled like a spring. Every muscle, every memory sharpened by years of training, was ready. She closed her eyes and let the memories flood in, not to drown, but to fuel her fire. The alley where her brother fell. The silence afterward. The vow she had whispered into the darkness. The next morning, the dojo filled with tension so thick it was almost tangible. The students gathered, their curiosity and fear mingling in the air. Jason stood close, his face a mask of concern and determination. The man arrived again, this time with no intention of hiding. His gaze locked onto her, cold and unyielding. "You ran once," he said, voice low. "But you can't run forever." She stood tall, eyes blazing. "I'm not running." The first strike was fast, a test, a warning. But she met it with grace and lethal precision. The room erupted into motion. Their fight was a brutal dance of skill and emotion. Every punch, every block carried the weight of years lost and pain unresolved. She moved with a fierce grace, her training and rage intertwining into something unstoppable. Jason and the others watched, breathless, as the simple woman they'd underestimated revealed a storm they never saw coming. The fight pushed her to the edge, every scar, every lesson, every heartbreak fueling her resolve. The man's attacks grew desperate, but so did her focus. Finally, with a precise, controlled move, she disarmed him, not just physically, but emotionally. She didn't need to break him. She needed to show she was no longer the frightened girl from the alley. The man collapsed to his knees, defeated not only by her strength but by her unyielding spirit. The dojo was silent. Then Nakamura stepped forward, breaking the tension with quiet respect. "You faced your past." She nodded, breath heavy but steady. "And I'm ready for what comes next." Jason approached, offering a hand, not just as a fellow fighter, but as an ally. She took it. In that moment, she was no longer just a simple woman threatened by black belts. She was a lethal fighter who had reclaimed her story. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. She had awakened a power within herself that no one could ignore. And the dojo would never be the same. The dojo was quiet now, but the energy in the air was electric, a charged calm after the storm. The students gathered around, eyes wide with a mix of awe and newfound respect. They had witnessed something rare, something more than just a fight. They had seen a woman confront her past and emerge stronger, not just in body, but in spirit. She stood in the center of the mat, sweat dripping, breath still steady. The simple woman who had walked in unnoticed weeks ago was now unmistakably changed. She wasn't just a fighter. She was a force of nature. Sensei Nakamura stepped forward, his voice warm but firm. Strength isn't just measured by how hard you hit, but by how you rise after falling. She nodded, the weight of those words sinking in deeper than any scar. Jason approached her, carrying an expression of genuine admiration. You taught me something I never expected to learn here, that strength comes from facing what scares you the most. She smiled, a rare softness breaking through. And sometimes, the biggest fight is the one inside. The students looked on, inspired. The dojo had transformed, not because of a new technique or a winning move, but because of a story shared in silence, in sweat, in courage. Later that evening, she sat alone, reflecting on the journey. The road had been long and lonely, marked by pain and loss. But now, she understood something vital. She wasn't defined by the threats she faced or the battles she fought. She was defined by the choices she made afterward, the decision to stand, to teach, and to heal. Her scars remained, but they no longer whispered of defeat. They told a story of survival and redemption. And for the first time in years, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The dojo doors opened, and a young girl stepped inside, hesitating but determined. "Will you teach me?" she asked quietly. She looked up, eyes meeting the girl's with a spark of recognition. The fire was there, the same fire that had once driven her. "Yes," she said. "But first, you learn that strength is more than muscle. It's heart." And with that, a new chapter began. In that quiet moment, surrounded by the fading light of day and the soft hum of the city beyond, she knew her journey was far from over. But she was ready. Because sometimes, the most lethal fighters are those who have learned to fight not just with their hands, but with their hearts. And that made all the difference.